All right, guys, so what we're starting off with today is midpoints and segment bisectors. The midpoint of a segment is a point that divides the segment into two congruent segments, into two equal parts. So that means the distance from A to M is going to be the exact same distance as M to B. The midpoint is the exact middle of a line segment. So the midpoint is going to be the exact middle. So the distance from A to M is the same as M to B. And the segments that make it up will be congruent. It'll be two congruent segments. So that is the definition of midpoint. Now, a segment bisector is a point, line, ray, line, segment, or plane that intersects the segment at its midpoint. It's a line, segment, point, or ray that cuts the line in half. It bisects it. It cuts it in half. Bisect means to cut in half. It's a bisector. We'll also talk about angle bisectors eventually. A line or ray or line segment that cuts an angle in half. It bisects it. That's it. And it's going to bisect it at the midpoint because it cuts it in half into two equal parts. So, there we go. So let's look at this one first. We'll look at the fractions here in a little bit. In the skateboard diagram, VW, line segment VW, is bisected by line segment XY at point T. So these two lines bisect each other at point T, right there in the middle. Now it also tells us that XT is 39.9 centimeters. We want to find the length of XY. We want to find the length of the skateboard. So if this one section is 39.9 centimeters, let's put the Chromebooks away. Thank you. We know that since this is a midpoint, the other segment will be 39.9 centimeters also, because the two segments are congruent to each other since point T is the midpoint. So if we want to find out what the length of the entire line is, well, we just need to add those two segments together. So the distance from X to Y would be 39.9 plus 39.9. So at that point there, we could type that into a calculator, 39.9 plus 39.9, and we should get 79.8. Any questions on this here so far? Yes, sir.
Do you have to draw the line?
No. No, I was just drawing it there to emphasize where the lines were at.
I never really understood why there's a line above the X and Y.
Was that, Logan, is that what you're talking about, having a line above XY here? Well, there's a difference. Here, when we say XY, without the line, we're talking about the measure, the length of the line. The length of XY is 79.8. When we include the line, like this here, we're actually talking about the line itself. It is a line segment, and that segment is set up there. That way we can distinguish between a line,
And the actual length.
right, the length, or if it's a line segment, or a ray. We're able to tell by just how it's named which one it is, so we know what we're looking for. So it gives us a better idea.
Like an arrow
Mm-hmm.
in front of it.
So a ray
Right.
would look like this here. Any other questions? Okay. Let's look at the next one. Identify the segment bisector of PQ and then find the length of PQ. So what would the segment bisector of this be? So it would be dealing with M and going out this way here. This here would be the segment bisector because point M is cutting the line in half. But what is it? What is MN? It is a line segment, a ray, a plane. What is, it's a ray because it has one endpoint and continues on indefinitely in a single direction. So this would be a ray, and we can name it ray MN. Now they told us that from P to M is 1 7/8. That's the distance from P to M. What's the distance from M to Q? It's the exact same, 1 7/8, because again, if it's the midpoint, it's in the exact middle. So if I want to find the whole length, PQ, we'll need to add 1 7/8 plus 1 7/8. We'll have to add those two together. So we could plug it in a calculator if you wanted. But if we did this by hand, let's add the whole numbers together first. So 1 and 1 is? Now, since 7/8 and 7/8, the denominators are the same, we can go on and add the numerators. So as Logan said, it's 14 over 8. Because we still have 8 of them. We have, yes. Divide both by 2. Not divide by 2, but we could have multiplied 1 7/8 by 2 and got to the answer. Yes, if we're adding or subtracting. If we're multiplying two fractions, then it will change it. Because it's, yeah, it's almost, we have 7/8 of a pizza, and we have another 7/8. So total, I have 14/8 of a slice. Now, when we look at this here, 14/8, since the denominator or the numerator is bigger than the denominator, that means we can pull a whole number out. And how many can we pull out? Just one. So the 2 becomes a, and 14 would reduce to 6. Can I reduce 6/8? Because they have a common factor of 2, which would reduce to
3, 4.
So the length of the line is 2 3/4. That's not a good thing.
Why?
All right, guys. Let's focus up here. Are there any questions on this here? We feel good with this here? Okay. Focus up here, Tyler. Do we need to see another example of one of these here? We feel comfortable with these here? Yes. Yes.
How'd you get that to a 3?
So 6 and 8 both have a common factor of 2. So if we look at this here, so 6/8 is the same as saying 2 times 3 is 6. Yep. 8 is 2 times. And whenever we have a number that's being divided by itself, it becomes 1. is 2 times 3 over 2 times 4, which is the same as 2 over 2 times 3 over 4. 2 divided by 2 is, which just leaves us with 3 over 4. Well, the 1 is being multiplied. So when we multiply by 1, what's 3 times 1? So it doesn't change. Because essentially what we're doing is we're reducing that fraction into lowest terms. Any common numbers in the fraction will reduce down.
The more you can simplify, the better.
Yep. All right, guys. Let's focus up here. Focus up here. So we're going to do, what this is similar to what we just did with the fractions and the whole numbers, except instead of them giving us the actual values of the lengths, they gave us these expressions. So they're saying that v to m is denoted by the expression 4x minus 1. And the distance from m to w is denoted by the expression 3x plus 3. So if we want to find either one of the lengths, we can find the value of x. If we can find the value of x, then we can plug it back in to find the length of either line, or the whole line. And what they tell us is point M is the midpoint of VW. Find the length of VM. Well, since this is the midpoint, I know that the distance from V to M and M to W will be the same, because they're the same length. Yes, so what we could say is that VM is equal to MW, because their lengths are the same. They're the same value. Now, they didn't give us a number for either one, but they told us V to M is denoted by 4x minus 1, so we can replace that. So VM we can replace with 4x minus 1. MW is said to be, well, hey, now we do have a way to solve for the value of x. Yeah. So any questions on this here before we start solving for x? We good with this here? Yes? So what can we do first in solving for x? Subtract what from both sides?
No, add 3 to both sides.
Okay. Yes, it is plus. Thank you.
I'm always confused, so I just thought it was...
Nope, I wrote it down wrong. So it's plus 3.
Hey, totally off subject.
Minus it now. Let you use it.
Yeah. Yes.
Totally off subject.
Yes.
You want to log in now?
Later. Okay, what are you lost with? Okay, so this is the midpoint. M is the midpoint, yes? Midpoint? So the distance from here to here is the same as from here to here. So VM is equal to MW. Now, we weren't given a value for VM, but we told its length is denoted by 4x minus 1. So we can say that VM is 4x minus 1. We're told that MW is denoted by 3x plus 3. So we can replace it here. So really, these two values are equal because M is a midpoint. Now we just need to solve for the value of x.
That's 6 and that's 3.
Huh?
No.
No.
Cancel out the 3 and then make it.
We're finding the value of x because x is a variable that we're finding the value for. Because when we solve for the value of x, we will find a number that will make both of these sides be the exact same. So what we need to do is we need to get x by itself.
Add 3. Subtract 3, add 3, we're good. Golden.
Since we have plus 3 here, we want to move it to the other side. We need to subtract to do the opposite, because 3 minus 3 is 0. It says plus. Yep. So we have, guys, we have 4x minus 4 is equal to 3x, because negative 1 minus 3 would give us negative 4. Now we need to get x by itself, so the next thing we can do is we need to get the x's on the same side. Because here we have 4x minus 4, and over here we have 3x. We need to get the x's all on the same side of the equal sign.
So do you count that once instead of negative 1? And you just minus negative 1 to 3 to get negative 4?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's what kind of threw me off there. I was like,
Okay. So what we need to do next is to subtract 4x from both sides, because we need to move the x's from the left side over to the right, because the ones on the right are already by themselves. So we need to get the rest of the x's onto the same side. Tyler, up here. And where you lost that? What part? Because we need to get x by itself. Because we're trying to solve for the value of x, so we need to get x on the same side of the equal side by itself. Because here we have x's on both sides. We need to get it over to the other side. So when we subtract 4x, 4x minus 4x is 0. So we're left with negative 4 on the left-hand side is equal to 3x minus 4x is negative x. So any questions on how we got negative x is equal to negative 4?
I thought that can't we just 1x?
It is negative 1.
Negative 1x.
Yes. Now we need,
negative 1x?
Yes.
yep, but we need to take the negative away by dividing both sides by negative 1. So negative and negative for the x will give us just x. Negative 4 divided by negative 1 will be. So the value of x is 4. Tyler, guys, yes. Yes. Guys. So, was 4 what we were looking for? What was it asking? It asked to find the length of m or VM. It asked us to find the length of VM. So we're taking this here because VM was told to us to be our 4x minus 1. That's what they told us that length was. So since we now found the value of x, we can take this, 4x minus 1, and plug 4 in for x, which would give us 4 times 4 minus 1. And 4 times 4 is? 1 is? So VM is 15. So we had to find the value of x to be able to plug it in to find out what the length of the line is. Now, if we use the other one, the 3x plus 3, if we use that equation instead and plug 4 in, well, 3 times 4 is, plus 3 is, it gives us the same thing. Because what do we know about m? M is the midpoint. So both lines will have the same length. So we should expect that both segments should come out to be 15 when we plug x back in. So if we found the right value of x, the length from B to M will be the same as the length from M to W. They will be the same. So the whole length, if we wanted to find the whole line, would be 30. Any questions on this here? Okay. Let's look at another one. Let's look at the next one. Identify the segment bisector of PQ, then find MQ. Now the segment bisector for this here is the midpoint, the line that cuts this in half. And we would call this line L, because line L cuts the line segment PQ in half into two congruent segments. So it cuts it into half so that PM is congruent to MQ. The distance from P to M is going to be the same as the distance from M to Q. So PM, its length, is equal to the length of MQ. Any questions on this so far? Now again, just like with the last one, they didn't give us a specific value for either length, but they gave us equations or expressions to denote them. So PM's expression is 5x minus 3. And we're going to set it equal to MQ's expression, which is 11 minus 2x. And the reason we set these equal to each other is to find the value of x. Because if we can find the value of that variable that makes these two equations or two expressions equal to each other, we'll be able to find the value that will let us be able to plug back in to solve to find the length, the overall length. So we need to find the value of x first. So we need to get x by itself. So looking at this here, 5x minus 3 is equal to 11 minus 2x. What can we do first to get x by itself? So with the 3 is what... So we can do that, but if we're talking about the 3, because I heard several, we can move the 3 over to the other side. Now, since this 3 is negative, we have to do the opposite. So we need to add 3, because negative 3 plus 3 is 0, because we want that to zero out, as these will cancel. So we're just left with 5x on the left-hand side. Now on the right-hand side, we have 11 plus 3, which is 16 minus. Then what can we do next? So, yes. Now, we wouldn't want to move the 14, because on the left-hand side, 5x is already by itself, yes? So if I add 14 to both sides, it would be taking the 14 from the right-hand side and moving it to the left, yes? It would be moving the 14 over. But if I look at the right-hand side, we have 14 and 2x. On the left-hand side, we just have 5x. So we want to move the 2x over to the 5x, because if we can have those together, the x's are on the same side. Yep. Possibly, yes. So what we can do here is add 2x to both sides, because the negative 2x plus 2x would be 0. 5x plus 2x would tell us that 7x is equal to 14. And last but not least, what can we do? divide both sides by, which tells us x is equal to 2. So we see that the value of x for this here will be 2. And now we just, as we saw in the first one, we just need to pick which one of the two equations we're going to use to find the length. So if we want, I could use 5x minus 3, because we saw it doesn't matter which one we use, because they will both give us the exact same value. So what we can do is 5 times 2 minus 3. Well, 5 times 2 is? Minus 3 is? So our length for, let's see here, MQ, the length of MQ would equal 7. And that's all that we need to do to be able to solve this one here. Yes.
Whenever they was making this, why couldn't they make it easier? What if you're stupid like me?
Tyler, don't use that language.
I put it in the best way I could.
Any questions on this, guys? All right, guys. Okay.
So I already went ahead and I did this one. I made it there.
We'll see. Let's see. All right, guys. Let's look at the next one here. So identify the segment bisector of RS. Well, the segment bisector for this is going to be line N. Line N is the line that cuts this segment in half. Now, and again, like we noticed so far, because it cut it in half, that means, Tyler, that means these two segments are going to be congruent to each other. So we can set the two equations, 4x plus 3 equal to 6x minus 12, so that we can solve for the value of x. Now the first thing we're going to want to do is to get the value of x by itself. So what we can do is I would subtract 4x from both sides. I try to keep the value of x positive if I can. Focus up here. So our 4x minus 4x is going to give us 0, which brings down to 3. Our 6x minus 4x would give us 2x minus 12. And again, we want to get the value of x by itself, so we are going to add 12 to both sides. Negative 12 plus 12 will cancel. And over here, 3 plus 12 will give us 15 is equal to x. And at this point here, to get x by itself, we're going to divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so we're just left with x. And 15 divided by 2 would be 7.5. So that tells us that the value of x is 7.5. So we found the value of x. Now the last thing we need to do is to plug it back in. So we can use 4x plus 3 to plug it back in. So we can do 4 times 7.5 plus 3. And we could type this into the calculator to be able to find this here. Put the Chromebook away. And if we multiply this by 4, we get 3, which would be.
I did that the opposite way, and I just went at 7.5, but
So I think you got negative 2x, so negative divided by a negative is a, so it should be 7.5. This here, negative and negative would give us a positive, because that should be positive.
Yeah, because that's just a negative right there.
Mm-hmm. Any questions on this here? Guys? The next thing we're looking at is midpoint, the midpoint formula. Now the midpoint formula tells us or gives us the ability to find the exact midpoint of any line segment. So if we know the x and y values of any point on a coordinate plane, we can find its midpoint by using this formula here. x1 plus x2 divided by 2, comma y1 plus y2 divided by 2. This right here will give us the exact midpoint of any line. And what we need to do to be able to utilize it is plug in. Yes, and we'll be given that when we solve it. So when we look at this here, we want to find the midpoint of line RS. So if we look at example 3, the endpoints of RS are at R, which is at 1, negative 3, and S, which is at 4, 2. And if we want to find the midpoint of this line, we utilize this formula for our midpoint. Because to find the x value, guys, of the midpoint, we're going to take x1 plus x2 and divide by 2. To find the y value of the midpoint, we're going to take y1 plus y2 and divide by 2. Yes, ma'am.
So it's kind of like coordinates?
Yes. So we're going to plug in the points from the coordinates. Now for R, again, the x value would be 1. The y value would be negative 3. And for S, the x value would be 4, and the y value would be 2. So when we come down here for this equation, we're going to plug in the two x values. Well, as we said, one of them is 1, and the other is 4. And we can do the same thing for the y values. One of the y values is, and the other is 2. And now we just need to simplify these to find the values of the midpoint. So here we can do 4 plus 1, which is divided by 2. And 5 divided by 2 is 2 and 1/2, or 2.5. Now the other one, negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. So we have negative 1/2 or negative 0.5. So our midpoint, we can say, is 2.5 comma negative 0.5, or we can say 2 and 1/2 comma negative 1/2. Either one of these here would be the midpoint. It's just determining, do we want to leave it in decimal form or in fractional form? Either one will work. Either one will work. Questions on this here? Haven't gotten there yet because we still have more of this to do. Are we good with this here? Yes? Awesome. All right. Let's look at this next example problem. We're not backing up yet. So looking at this here, again, we're going to be using this formula for the midpoint. x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And again, to find the midpoint, this helps us because we're going to plug in the x values and the y values to find out what the x and y value of the midpoint is. Now, when we look at our points, we're given 1, 2, and 7, 8. So we'll take the x values from these 2 points, which will be 1 and 7, and the y values are 2 and 8. And once we plug the x values in to the x value spots and the y values into the y value spot, we will simplify these down. Well, 1 plus 7 is, and 8 divided by 2 is, 2 plus 8 is, divided by 2 is, so the point for the midpoint is 4, 5. Okay, we will stop.